Hello and good morning, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on new media, today we will be talking on data journalism. And for this very talk, we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Anubhuti Yadav. Dr. Anubhuti Yadav is head of the department New Media, Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Dr. Anubhuti Yadav is a prolific and a dynamic professor who believes in giving immense examples so that the lectures become lively as well as understandable. So dear friends, let's welcome our guest Dr. Anubhuti Yadav and let's try to understand more and more about the topic data journalism. Hello ma'am, welcome to the Lucid Chart.
Thank you very much. Good morning everyone. As Gitika mentioned, today we'll be discussing about data journalism. And before I begin with my lecture, I would like to begin this with certain examples which are happening right now in the field of data journalism. We all know that Olympics are going on in Rio, Brazil, and it started on 5th of August. And there are a number of data stories and data journalism is going on right now. If you look at the numbers, there are around 206 countries which are participating in these Olympics. There are 16 days of competition which will be happening in Rio. There are more than 11,000 athletes which will be participating in the Olympics. Now you can imagine with this number how many data related stories we might be having, and this is what we are going to talk about today. That in wherever we go, whatever we do, there are a lot of data, there are a lot of data sets, and as a journalist, we need to identify those data sets and we need to create stories out of those data sets. So if we talk about the Olympics, and as I said, there are a number of players, so there are a number of data related stories which can emerge from there, which means the stories related to the medal counts, stories related to different athletes, story related to different sports. Right now we have around 28 sports there in Olympics. Stories related to how much budget is there and how much host country is spending on the Olympics. So there are a number of stories which can come out from the event which is happening right now, and many of us are glued on to our television sets. We are reading sports page every day. We are looking at the sports page of the newspaper. We are hooked on to our smartphones to get the feeds from the Olympics and to know what is happening latest as far as the Olympics are concerned. So today I would like to begin my lecture with some of the database stories which are coming out from Olympics, and there's this website which is called journalism.co.uk, and they have actually collated number of stories which are done by the international media outlets, and they are talking about the data journalism. Especially they are digging data and they are playing with the data, and this is something which is happening in Rio right now. So the first story is about when this particular the Olympics started, and we know that it started in 1896 in Athens, and this story this is done by New York Times, and this actually gives an overview of how this particular game is going on for the last so many years, and it started from 1896 and till 2012. There's something which happened in London. They have collated the data related to that, and they've created this particular visualization, and you can see that the data is reflected and depicted in the form of streams, and the thickness of streams depicts the number of medals won by the different the nation, different countries. So this particular map, if you look at this map carefully, this not only shows the history of Olympics, but it also shows the history of the way the different countries are participating in these games. Now if you look at the beginning of this game, which means like 1896, you would see that only 10 countries they won medal in those particular games, but like when we reached 2012, there are around 85 countries who actually won Olympic medals. Also, it also talk about the history, which means that if you go to around 1916, you would see that due to World War I, there was no Olympic held at that point of time. Same is the case during the World War II. Also, very interesting thing which is there, which is reflected in this particular map, is that United States boycott of the 1980 Olympics, which was held in Moscow, and thereafter in 84, when it was organized, when the Olympics were organized in Los Angeles, Soviet Union boycott this particular game. So this is a very interesting visualization which talks about the history of Olympics from the year it started till 2014, and obviously they'll add 2016 also, and how the different countries are participating and how the number of countries are also increasing with this. So this is one visualization. The second visualization is done by BBC, and this is something which is very interesting. When we watch certain games, and when we look all these athletes playing the different games, we would like to participate in the process. And this is something which is an interactive visualization. And here, what one can do is you can have a look at this particular infographic, and you can find out who is your Olympic body match, which means that if you feed in a data here, for example, your height, your weight, your date of birth, and you mention whether you are a male or female, then you'll get on to the athletes that actually match your body type. And this is something which is very interesting, and this also tells how many players are there for one particular height, who is like the shortest player in the Olympics right now. And also, like, it will give you a list of all those players who will match your body type. And this is an interesting visualization, and it's an interactive visualization, and you can always explore this. This has been done by BBC. The third visualization and the third database story was about Sun Yang, and the headline, as it says, that how Sun Yang caught up with the Chad Lake close to claim gold in the 200-meter freestyle. This is very interesting because whatever had happened, especially like this race was concerned, it happened in the last 25 meters, and it's live interactive, wherein you can see the people participating in the race, and you can see how the Sun Yang actually overtook another player, Chad, in the last 25 meter. I'll just give you a glimpse of this particular interactive and how it is working. Now this is the website of The Guardian, and this is the timeline, how he did it leg by leg. And when you click on as it happened, you will be able to see the 50 meters first, and then 100 meter, and you can see it in this timeline that the Chad is ahead, and then again 150 meter, still the Chad is ahead, and the last 50 meters, which means that in the last 25 meters it was the Sun Yang which actually overtook Chad in the 200 meter freestyle. So this was one case study. Now coming on to another one, this is very interesting because if you people are following Olympics, we know that the Michael Phelps is the most successful Olympic player, and this infographic is also done by New York Times, and this is actually talking about the Michael Phelps versus Phelps, which means like he started this participating in Olympics in 2000 when it happened in Sydney. And after that, in 2000 when he participated, he came fifth in the race. But after that, he participated in 4 Olympics, and this one is the 5th Olympics. Right now, he's 31 years old, and he already has 27 Olympic medals around his neck. So this infographic tells about the Michael Phelps, and I'll show you the infographic also. So this is the story, Michael Phelps versus himself, and this talks about his journey in the last 4 Olympics, and now also like he's participating in 2016, and he's already got 2 gold medal for this. This also have a comparison of how he fared in the last 16 years, which means the comparative analysis of young Phelps and the Phelps who is 31-year-old. If you play this particular infographic, this will give you the comparative analysis of how he is faring, and if you compare it from the 2000 and 2016. So these were some of the case studies which are from Olympics, which are happening in Rio right now. And since this lecture is on data journalism, and I thought that it is important to know like what all database stories which we are getting from Rio, something which is happening right now. So when we talk about data journalism, is it something new? We talk about a lot about data journalism, data analytics, big data and all. But if you look at the data journalism as a concept, it is not a new concept. If you look at the Guardian, in 1821, they came up with their first data-related story. And at that point of time, the Guardian was called, the Guardian Manchester. And this particular story is about, the different schools. It was a list of schools which was leaked. And with the list of schools, there were the number of students who were enrolled in these schools, and they were getting the free education in those particular schools. And this list was actually leaked by one person whose name was like termed as they're calling him as NH. And the reason he leaked this particular information was that because there was an anomaly, there was inaccuracy in the data, because the data represented that there were around 8,000 students who were getting free education at that point of time, but in reality there were around 25,000 students. So at that point of time, because of the inaccuracy in the data, it became a very big story. Second example of data journalism is Mortality of British Army 1858. This was done by Florence Nightingale. We know that she is the one who campaigned for the health of the British troops and all, and she presented whatever her findings was through these particular graphics. And at that point of time, we can see that was something which was very trendy, and she presented it to the Parliament. And the case which she made that most of the deaths which were happening at the time of the war, they were happening because of the preventable diseases and not by the bullets. So there was so that there is a need for the intervention of the medical facilities and the medical interventions as far as the health of the troops are concerned. So these are the two data-based stories, and very important stories, and something which happened in 1821 and 1858. So we can say that this is not a new concept. So what is new? The new here is the way it is done. So if you look at the history of data journalism, or if we can say that the computer-assisted reporting or visualization, it actually passed through different stages. It actually started with the computer-assisted reporting, and this is used often in traditional investigative stories, wherein we are finding stories in data with or without visualization. So this is how it actually started with. They were using computers, they were using some softwares to try and analyze data, and then creating story out of it. The second stage, and where we are right now as far as the India is concerned, that is visualizing stories. And we have seen a lot of stories which are coming in newspaper, a lot of infographics are there, and what we are doing here is that we are using the data to tell a story or explain a complex problem that will involve graphic or visualization. If you look at the newspaper, Times of India, they have come with the, one column which is called statistics.com. They're combining two words, which is 3 words in fact: stats, Times of India, and statistics. So that's a very interesting thing which has come, and they are playing with the data in that. And we just have the infographic. There is no analysis of that particular data, but that infographic is there. Then the third is the interactive stories, providing a service or a tool that tells the reader something personally relevant. It could be the school scorecards, table or simple financial tools and calculators. Now this is something which is very important, and many international media outlets, they are actually coming up with a lot of interactive stories wherein you can involve in that story. You can get the data which you feel is relevant to you, the data which you feel that you would like to have, instead of just one static infographic wherein the media outlets are giving you the entire information which is converted into an infographic. In the interactive, you interact with that data set and you interact with that story. So there are certain tips for a data journalist. When we are talking about data journalist, we are talking about the stories in the numbers versus numbers by themselves. So when we are talking about data journalism, it's not just data. What we are looking in data journalism as a journalist is the stories in those numbers. So the focus, yes, it is on data also, but ultimately for the readers, for the viewers, we have to create stories out of those data. Also, we have to give a human face to data, how that particular data set is relevant to our target audience. They should be able to connect with that data set. It should not be just numbers. The moment we'll present numbers, the target audience, they won't be interested in that. So we have to give human face to our data. Then investigative journalism requires collaboration. This is something which is very important, because when we are talking about investigative journalism, and especially when we are talking about the database journalism, it requires collaboration, because as you've seen in the first 5 slides wherein I discussed the database stories from Rio, you've seen that one is that there is a lot of research going into that. Second is someone is actually creating that the program, so that you can build up those infographics or interactive stories on that. And the third one is the analysis. So you need to have the people with the different expertise, with the different skill sets involved in that process. So the investigative journalism, database journalism, it requires collaboration. If in case you're interested to get into data journalism, so you need to collaborate with the people who are there in graphics, the people who are good in programming, so that they can create certain software for you, so that you can build your interactive stories on that, and the analysis, and the people who do analysis. So as a journalist, you're the one who will be doing analysis, but before that, as far as the making of that software is concerned, application is concerned, graphics is concerned, that has to be done by someone else. But nowadays we are also talking about the multitasking. So as a journalist, little bit of this should be known to a journalist also. Also, something which we need to take into consideration is that when we are talking about database journalism or a database story, it takes time. Because we are talking about data, and we are talking about large number of data sets, and the information which we are talking about is huge. So to sift that information and to make sense out of that information, you take you need a lot of time. You have to do a lot of research, and a lot of time is required for that. Don't waste time fishing. Have insight first, or get the user to help. This is very important. So the moment you feel that you have to be involved in some database story or data journalism, so don't waste time in fishing. I mean, don't waste time straight away onto the data. First, you need to have certain insight. If you have an insight that there's some problem here, or there can be some story lying in that particular data, only then you should go and try and dig that data and try and analyze that data. Or clean your data and triple check it. This is something which is very important, as we have seen the first story which was done by Guardian Manchester in 1821. There was a problem because there was an inaccuracy in the data, and there is always a chance that there is an inaccuracy in the data. So we have to clean the data, we have to triple check the data which we are working on. Then plan publication and partner with a range of outlets. So if you're a freelancer, I mean, you need to plan the publication of your interactive story or a database story, and you have to partner with a range of outlets. And nowadays there are a number of media firms who are looking for the database stories. always have a page wherein you explain your methodology. That is something which is very important. If it is a database story, then you need to tell how you have actually done this story, what was your sample size, and what formulas did you use for that. So this is something which you need to do. And then be prepared to respond to critics and staff to cover corrections and feedback. So this is something which is very important, and this is like for any other story like which we write. You have to look in for the feedback from the target audience, from your peer group, from your colleagues, so that you come out with an excellent database story. Now, what makes data journalism different? One is that it is the new possibilities that open up when you combine the traditional nose for news and ability to tell a compelling story with the sheer scale and range of digital information now available. So here what we are doing is, the other two things are the same. You need to have nose for news and you need to have ability to tell a compelling story. But you are doing both these things by using the large amount of data sets which are available on the web. Second, the focus shifts from being the first one to report to being the ones telling us what certain development actually means. So it is not just reporting what is happening around us, but you're actually analyzing the entire thing and you are telling like what this development means for the target audience. Then building articles based on facts and insight is a relief. This means less dependency on guessing, quotes, etc. And this is what we are doing. Whenever we have to do a story, we depend a lot on the interviews, we depend a lot on quotes. But the moment you try and build a story which is based on facts, you don't have to depend on those quotes and those interviews. You know that the fact and the data is a very credible source of information. And then getting into data journalism offers a future perspective. This is something which is very important, which means that as a journalist, if you start working on data and you start working on database story, so it is not only in the field of journalism you're going to use it. If you go to PR, public relations, you'll be able to use the same technique. If you go to advertising, you'll be able to use the same technique. So which means that the moment you start working with data, you know how to analyze data, you're in a position to make certain visualization. So you can not only work in the field of journalism, you can always work in the field of public relations, advertising also. And when we are talking about the data journalism, it is basically the number crunching that meets the wordsmithing, which means that one, you need to know how to play with the numbers, you need to know how to analyze the data. At the same time, you should be in a position to create story out of those data. So it is basically the meeting point of the number crunching and the wordsmithing. Now, there are certain case studies. These are very successful case studies, and many of the journalists, they got award for doing these stories. The first story is called What Went Wrong, and the story is done by Steve Doig. Steve Doig actually got a Pulitzer Prize in 1993 for this story. And this story is about, Hurricane Andrew. When the Hurricane Andrew came, there was a lot of devastation, there was a lot of destruction. So when the thing was happening, there were a number of journalists who were reporting, that particular disaster. But at the same time, Steve Doig, what he did, he tried to use two data sets. He used two data sets. One data set was the speed of the wind, and the second was the amount of devastation and the destruction which happened. And he combined these two data sets. When he combined these two data sets, and the result which came out of that was that the destruction which happened at that particular place was not because of the speed of the wind and the hurricane was very strong. It happened because the building codes there was very weak, and that is something he was able to dig out from analyzing this particular thing by combining the two data sets, the speed of the wing and the amount of devastation which had happened, and he got to know, and after that there were a lot of policies which were made related to the building codes and all. So this is one case study, and we'll be talking about more case studies on data journalism after a break. Hello, welcome back. We were discussing about case studies related to data journalism. We had just discussed one case study that was done by Steve Doig, and it was on Hurricane Andrew. And we've seen how he actually combined two data sets to dig that information that, the amount of devastation and destruction which had happened at that point of time, it was not because of, the speed of wind. It was because the building codes were very weak. Another case study is about the Las Vegas newspaper. They did this story on the hospitals in the Las Vegas, and the title of the story was "Do No Harm." Now, when you look at this story in the newspaper, it started with the paragraph which said that there is a running joke about hospitals here. Where do you go for health care in Las Vegas? And the answer is the airport. So this story is about, the kind of health care was there in Las Vegas, and there were a lot of issues related to hospital care in the Las Vegas because there were a lot of deaths happening at that point of time, and that's why this joke that where would you go if you need a medical care, and the answer is the airport. Now this is done by the Las Vegas Sun. And here what they have done, they have actually explored number of complaints. The Las Vegas Sun, they actually obtained 140 complaints concerning Las Vegas Hospital in 2008 and 2009. And all of these complaints were substantiated by the state investigation. And you'll see that, if you go to the infographic, you'll see, all those complaints here. And these complaints are related to the preventable injuries, hospital-acquired infections, punctures and lacerations, systemic failure. So these were the kind of the complaints the administration which got, and they got the list of all these complaints, and they actually created an infographic, and it's an interactive infographic wherein that if you go to one particular complaint, you will be able to know that this happened in which hospital, and what was the reason behind that particular complaint, and what was the reason behind the death which had occurred at that point of time. So this is an example of an interactive database story. Another database story is about the the murders which were happening in the US, and it says that there are a lot of murders which are not being solved. There are a lot of homicide cases which are not being solved in US, and this particular story is done by the scriptnews.com, and they actually come up with an infographic when they analyze the entire thing, and especially like the homicide solution rate, and when they analyzed all the murders which had happened and the solution rate of the same, they actually came on to something which is very surprising, which means that when they analyzed the data of 1965, at that point of time the solution rate was, the homicide solution rate was 90%, which means that the murders happening at that point of time, out of the total murders, the 90% of that murders were actually, people will able to make out that this person was the one who actually murdered. So and the solution rate was 90%. But if you look at the data, and if you look at the data of 2008, you would see that the solution rate is around 60%, which means that there is a decline in the homicide solution rate from 1965 to 2008, and that too when nowadays we have a lot of new investigative techniques available. So this was one very interesting story wherein the murders which had happened from 1965 to 2008, they were analyzed, and they can come on to this inference that there is a decline in the homicide solution rate. Another very important example is message machine, which was done by ProPublica. And this is what they did. At the time of the elections, there were a lot of messages which were sent out by the different leaders. And these messages which were sent out to the people, they were not the same messages. They were the different messages to the different groups of people. And this is what they did. They wanted to see, what kind of differences are there in those messages. How they are targeting women, how they are targeting working class, how they are targeting, the youth, how they are targeting teenagers. So they could find out that, the messages which were going out from, the different leaders, they were different for the different age groups. And in this, they also invited people because though they were also collecting those messages, but at the same time, they also invited people to participate in the entire process. And they said that whenever you get, certain messages from any political leader, you send that message back to us so that we can have that message in our data. So these were certain case studies which tells about the power of data. In using data, how can we write good stories, effective stories, and now we'll come on to the tools for data journalism. The tools for data journalism is very important because you've seen a number of stories till now. For example, when you saw the stories related to which is from the Rio, and which is done by the New York Times, wherein we are saying that if you enter a data, you'll be able to know that whether your body type matches the body type of which athlete. So there, that particular infographic and that particular application was actually developed by certain programmers and decoders. They have worked on that particular thing, and then the journalist, they fed data, and they created a story out of it. And also another very important thing which is happening is that when the programmers are working on it, they also have to work in collaboration with the journalist, because the journalist first have to have the story in mind, that this is the kind of interactive I would like to have, and on the basis of that he can ask the programmers and coders to develop interactive in such a way, the application in such a way. But at the same time, there are a number of tools which are available, which means that these are digital tools readily available. Most of the tools which we'll be discussing now will be the free tool, which means that you can use it for your stories. If you have data, you'll be able to feed your data in those particular tools. You can import your data in those tools, and you'll be able to create your own digital data-based stories. So the first tool is the lucidchart.com. This is basically for the diagrams. It's, as it said, that it's a collaborative, which means that it's not only you will be working on this. If you want to involve other people also, you can involve others also in the creation of this data-based story. So there are a number of options which are available in this, which means that you can create different type of graphs, you can create different types of charts, and this is something which can be done by you, and this can be done in collaboration with other people. So this is the one tool which is available, and you can try this thing, and this is the lucidchart.com. Another tool which is used extensively by the journalist is the Google Fusion table. Right now we are making tables, but we are using the Word platform, and we using that we'll be able to make certain tools and all, or maybe if we want to work on table, we used Excel application. But the Google Fusion table allows you a lot of other features also, which means that you can upload any file from your computer to this particular tool. You can upload the spreadsheets, you can create an empty table. I mean, you can start making table from this particular tool only. You can search for the data sets. There's a search button here, and then you can go on that particular data set, and then you can import that data set on the Google Fusion table. For example, this is something which I have made for this lecture. This data I have taken from the DataGov website, and this is basically about the availability cum status school building based sample survey, which means that this is talking about the infrastructure of schools. And when I imported the data, I imported the data which is talking about the availability of toilets in schools, school having their own buildings, school having pakka building, condition rooms in condition of rooms in pakka building. So these are the kind of the data, and this is the kind of information which I've got through the data which I've imported here. And this is talking about the different states. So the first thing right now which you have here is the schools which have their own buildings. So you can see from this particular graph that the Jammu Kashmir is one state wherein the schools, they don't have their own building. And if you look at the Arunachal Pradesh and Bihar, there you can get to know that those schools in these particular states, they have their own building. So with this graph, this only gives you an information. But if you, as a journalist, if you want to analyze it, then you have to dig a little deeper in this, that what is the reason behind it, that the Jammu and Kashmir as a state, they don't have their own the schools don't have their own buildings. Now if you go to the second thing, this is another schools having own building. Then this is another chart which is actually telling about the number of this is availability of toilets, which means that if you look at these states, and you will be able to find out that in which states the schools have their own toilets. And this is also very surprising when you talk about the Arunachal Pradesh, or if you compare it with the previous table which we have got, most of the Arunachal Pradesh schools, they had their own building. But if you look here, the availability of toilets in schools, this is something very surprising, wherein if we compare it with other states, Arunachal is the only state wherein we have the less number of toilets in schools. So this also gives you one kind of information, and it also asks you to dig a little deeper into this, that what is the reason behind this particular data. Also with this, the kind of graphs which we have seen and the data which we had imported in Google Fusion table, these are the questions which come to our mind. One is that why schools in J&K do not have their own buildings? What is the reason behind that? That also could be a topic for one particular story. Why availability of toilets is less in Arunachal Pradesh, and what does the following trend indicates? What does that mean? The schools having own building. Why is it that certain states have very less schools which have their own building, but there are certain states which have a lot of schools have their own pakka building. So what is this particular trend says? So which means that just by importing one data set, and that too from a government website, you can write number of stories. Another data visualization tool is Infogram. This is also a very interesting tool. Here you can play with the numbers, data, you can play with the maps also, you can create number of maps, world maps, India map, and you can save your infographics in the library. When you create infographics, you get number of templates, and these are the kind of templates you have. The only thing which you have to do is you have to click on one template and you have to feed data there. And when we'll discuss about data visualization and data visualization tools, at that point of time we'll talk about in detail, how to create infographics using, all these digital tools. Another data-based digital tool is Piktochart, and here using Piktochart you can make a lot of infographics, but most of the infographics would be the static infographics. But in this infographic also you can do it individually, but you can always invite other people also to contribute to it. For example, if you're working in a team, so there is this one person who has access to data, you can work with the data. Then there's another person who's good with the graphics. That person can create graphics and add graphics to that particular infographics. So which means that what we discussed previously, that it's a collaborative affair. The number of people with different skill sets, they have to be involved in the making of infographics. And Piktochart is a very, very nice tool. Using this, you can create very interesting and beautiful infographics, and a lot of newspapers nowadays, they are using this particular tool. Many Eyes is another platform which can be explored for the visualizations. Chartsbin is another one, so you can make charts, and this is basically focusing more on the maps. So if you want to create something related to the maps, you can try this Chartsbin. Silk is another platform wherein you can publish your data online. And you have, and there are gallery of silks, which means that the infographic which you make using silk as a platform, they call it a silk. And you can write and you can do a complete story using this silk platform. So this is a very interesting tool. You can always explore this. GeoCommons is another tool which is available for us, and especially like when we are talking about the data which is related to the places, the data which is related to the maps. Now we have lot of data which is coming from the different places, and we have lot of stories which are related to the different places. For that we need to be aware of what are the tools which are available using which we can create those infographics wherein we can plot certain places. So one is the GeoCommons. At the same time, you can also use Google Maps. Basically, we have used Google Map till now to locate the places, or if we have to go somewhere, we would like to know the direction of that particular place. At that point of time, we just go and explore Google Map. But very few of us know that using Google Map, we can create our own maps, which means that if you want to create a map of community radio stations in India, you'll be able to create that. If you want to create a map of maybe television station in India, you are in a position to do that. So the Google My Map is another platform wherein you can map a lot of places, locations, and you can create a story out of it. Now, sources for data, this is something which is very important. We are talking about the data journalism. It is based on data, and where do we get the data from? There are a number of organization, research organization which are working in this field, and you have a lot of data which is available with this particular organization. You can take data from there. There are number of departments also which are working in this area, the government departments, which means like if you have MHRD, then you know that the NCRD is working on the survey, the annual school survey. Then we also know that the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they're also working on the lot of researches through which they bring out a lot of data. So the sources of data is something which is very, very important, and you need to know from where you can get those data sets. So if you have interest in data journalism, and if you want to get into the field of data journalism, you want to write stories which are based on data, the first thing which you need to know is that what kind of stories would you like to do. Is it a sports story would you like to do, or you would like to do something related to environment, or you would like to do something related to education. So once you have identified your area wherein you would like to do more research, then you can identify what are the organizations, institutions, government departments, NGOs which are working in this particular area, and then you can try and find out and retrieve data from there. Also, there is a lot of data which is available on the web. If you'll go and if you'll Google something, say for example the conditions of schools, or maybe like the enrollment in schools, you'll see that there's a lot of data available there on the web. Now, most of the time when you look at those particular data sets, they are available in the PDF format. Now, when you see those PDF format, and if you try and make visualization out of that, that won't be possible, because you need to have those Excel sheets or spreadsheet if you want to import that to any of the softwares which we have discussed till now. So there's another tool which are available, or tools available in fact, and those are called data scraping tool, which means that if you find a PDF document somewhere using data scraping tool, one data scraping tool is import.io, which means using that you can scrape data, you can get the data, and you can convert that data into an Excel form which can be used further in the digital tools which we have already talked about. So when we are talking about the sources of data, the one very important source of data is the data.gov.in, and this is the government website, and in this website you'll see a lot of data sets. You can search, there is a search button there, and you can search the different resources which are available. They have actually made this data available in the form of catalogs. There are number of the departments which are listed here, there are number of ministries which are listed there, and all the departments and the ministries, they are asked to share and upload their data on the data.gov website. So for each and every ministry there is a data contributor, and there is a chief data officer, and these are the people who are responsible for getting data onto the data.gov website. So besides the data.gov, because if you are doing a story which is India specific, if you're talking about your own country, then yes, that's the platform which is available for you. But for example, if you're doing a story which is like outside India, so all the countries, they have this thing available, which means that you'll be able to find a lot of portals, and these are the open data portal in the different countries, and you can have this particular graph. This is available on the data.gov website also, wherein at the on the footer there is something called open data portals in the different countries. When you click there, you'll be able to reach on to the country specific open data website. So if you can see this thing, that you have a open data portal in South Korea, then you have it in New Zealand, you have it in Australia, Nigeria. So all these countries, they have these open data platform, and this is something, and this is the something which you need to harness. There's a lot of information which is already available. There's a lot of data sets which are already available. The only thing which you have to do is you have to go there. You have to find data which is relevant to you, and then you have to start working on those data sets. Now, if you are really interested in data journalism, and if you want to explore more on data journalism, there is this one handbook which is called Data Journalism Handbook.org. This is an open, resource, which means that a lot of journalists, they got together and they started working on this particular handbook. There are a lot of examples which are there in this particular data journalism book, and you can use it and you can reuse it, and if you want to take examples from there, you can take example from there. Also, there are a number of case studies, and they also ask you to share some of the database stories. So if you, in case you have some database stories, you can also share those database stories here. Also, we all are working in the different areas. Some are, researching in the field of environment. Some are researching in the field of education. It is always good to share, the stories which are related with the data. So if you have any, stories which are related to data journalism, do share it with us, and you can send it to me through email also. And also share softwares, because right now I have discussed around 6-7 softwares and applications which are available for the data journalism. But besides this, on web, if you go and explore, there are many more such softwares. So if you come across something which is very, very interesting, then that is something which you can share with you. Also, data journalism as a concept is very new in India. Though we have started with the infographics, but still we need to have teams, we need to collaborate with each other to work on the database stories. So for that also, it's always good to be together, and you're always interested to write. If you're interested, you're welcome to write to me, and we can always come up with some database stories. So this is all from my side for now, and this is one thing which I would like to say at the end of this particular lecture is that there's a lot of information which is available on the web. As a journalist, as a teachers, as a students, we need to know how to use that particular information. Also, for example, there are a lot of PhD students who will be watching this particular program. Many a times what happens that when we are doing something, when we are researching, we try and print or publish the data set as it is. Do that because we need to know what those data sets are, and the raw data is very important. But at the same time, for the public to consume, for the people, to make it the friendly for the people, to make it easier for them to understand, it's always good to convert them into an infographic. It's always good to convert them into an interactive, and you share it with the public. One is that you're working for your research. At the same time, all these digital platforms allows you to share your infographic on Facebook, on Twitter, all the social media platforms. So the moment you make any infographic, it's always good to share it with the people so that you can get the feedback and you can improve upon your infographic. Thank you very much.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. And today also we had a very, very great session. As we were talking about the data specifically, now the question arises, what about the authentication of data? Because we try to grab data from the various sources if we create our own also. So who is responsible for the entire authentication of the data?
See, as far as the authentication of data, and especially when we are talking about the data related stories, we need to have that data which is credible, and that's why I said that it's always good to get the data from good resources, the renowned sources. One is the DataGov platform. Another the example which I gave was the open data portals which are there in the different countries. So it's always good to take data from there. Also, there are a number of research organizations. Now, as a data journalist, because I'll be taking data from somewhere, so my job is to tell that this is the source, this is the place from where I've taken the data, and try, as a journalist, I have to try that I should take data from the sources which are credible, those who have certain credential in that particular area.
So can we take help from the different database management systems also if we are covering a particular, I would say a particular beat or particular area we are covering? So if we, for example, if we are covering about a particular organization only, so could we access the database management system or database system of those particular organizations?
Exactly. See, one very important source is their own database if they're ready to share. So it depends, because see, when you are saying database, one is that something which will be available online, and another is something which right now they're not sharing it with other people. So you have to take permission. If they're ready to share their database, then you can use that. Another very important source for information is that their own websites. Say, for example, if I'm doing a story on health, or I'm talking about family welfare, I would like to go to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website and look at what kind of data they already have there on website. So it depends. There are a number of organizations who are open to this idea of sharing their database with the data journalists, and that's why it requires a lot of time, because searching for the data is something which is very important, and that requires and that takes a lot of your time, searching for the credible data.
Definitely searching for the credible data. In this context, organizations or all those systems who are creating database should continuously update their database also.
Yes,
for the journalistic point of view also, as well as for the researchers point of view. So ma'am, what else are we going to study in our next sessions?
See, next session which we'll be talking about, in this session I've just mentioned that these are the tools available. Now, how to work on those tools, that is something which is very important. For example, I've told you that Google Fusion Table is something which is available for us. Piktochart is something available for us. Infogram is available for us. But how to create infographics and interactives using these platforms, that is something which I'll be talking about. That will be more of a demo, which means that I'll be taking certain data, I'll be importing data on these particular tools, and I'll show how we can create infographics using those particular digital tools.
Definitely, we are looking forward for the next session and the future sessions also. And dear friends, we would like to tell you all that your feedbacks are very, very important for us. So kindly keep writing us in form of your suggestions as well as questions. Our email ID is info.cc@nic.in. We would love to solve your queries the next time when Dr. Anubhuti Yadav visits our studio. All the lectures pertaining to the series New Media are there for you on the YouTube. This lecture is also going to be uploaded very soon. So keep watching us and keep writing us. We would be meeting again very soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.